Hey, good mornings, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's Daryl here. It is bright and freaking early, man. It's 3 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, I got to talk about this. To be honest, I'm not confident talking about the Supreme Court, the ruling about Trump being on the ballot. It's a little confusing. I did good in high school. I never failed a course. I was kind of in accelerated courses. I went on to technical school and I worked for architects, designing. I worked on the state police barracks here in Connecticut. Doing design, but I've never really felt confident talking about all the amendments and the laws and the Congress, and when you get into the specifics of the Supreme Court and this and that. I never felt confident talking about it, but I have to talk about this. Okay, the Supreme Court ruling that 9-0 that Donald Trump can be on the ballot. It's not, their ruling was that the states cannot take Donald Trump off the ballot. See, I don't even know where to start with this. Republicans, they always say, oh, it goes back to the states. It's up to the certain people in areas of the country to decide what they want for laws. And the whole thing with Texas and Florida and the border. Now, just recently, the Supreme Court ruled that federal agents can take down the razor wire and all that stuff about going to war with the government, and Texas seceding from the union, and fighting the federal officials. So the Supreme Court doesn't rule in their favor. They say it's up to the states. It's up to us to decide. If there's an invasion, we can fight it, and we're not gonna go along with what the Supreme Court says. But then it seems hypocritical, because then now all of a sudden it's a flip-flop where it's not up to the states. It's not up to the individual municipalities. It's up to the Congress now to decide. That was the Supreme Court ruling. So this ruling seems hypocritical, because like with the whole border thing, they said the Republicans argued that it's up to Texas to how they want to handle their border. But when it comes to voting for the president, well, then it's up to Congress, and it's not up to the individual states. That do you see that? You see what I'm saying there? It seems like hypocrisy to me. It does. The Republicans are always about, well, it's up to the individual states, the smaller governments, to decide what to do in their states. So, honestly, I think it is right. I think that Section 4, that Amendment 14, Section 3, was made for this. Donald Trump is a insurrectionist. And it's made for this. I'll get more into that in a second. I think Donald Trump doesn't need. I'm ambivalent about this myself, because I'm kind of glad that they did rule this. That if he loses, if and when he loses, he'll lose fair and square. He'll lose with all 50 states voting, because he does not need one more excuse to start crying about rigged elections. He does this. He did this in 2016. He does this in 2020, and he's doing it again now. He's already setting up excuses if he loses. He's done this for the last every time he's been ran for president. So he doesn't need one more excuse, because if he loses and he wasn't on the ballot in Colorado, that's all you're going to hear. You're going to see the gallows for the Supreme Court, and instead of attacking Congress, then they're going to go attack the Supreme Court. That's honestly why I think the Supreme Court is scared of Donald Trump and his voters and his MAGA supporters. They saw what happened with Congress, and they don't want that mob showing up at the Supreme Court. That's exactly why I believe it was 9-0. It seems hypocritical to me. Everything is all about the states controlling what goes on in their states. Up until this. Then now all of a sudden it's not up to the states. It seems like hypocrisy to me. Okay, let's go back to why this amendment, Amendment 14, Section 3. An insurrection shall not be on the ballot. Basically, that's I'm cutting it down to the basics here. It was made because of slavery and the Civil War. Okay, so back during the Civil War, the South, they were talking about states in the South, and insurrectionists. They were talking about specifically about individual states in the South, and insurrectionists shall not be on the ballot if they engaged in insurrection. Individual states, And here you are. I think it seems like this amendment is specifically made for individual states to decide who should be on the ballot and who shouldn't be on the ballot. That's my thought on this. But I think in the long run, Donald Trump does not need one more excuse to start crying about rigged elections and rig this and rig that and crooked Joe Biden and the Biden crime family and all this stuff. When Jared Kushner took how many millions of dollars did Jared Kushner take from Saudi Arabia? Remember Saudi Arabia? They were the guys all the 19 guys that were in those planes, and Jared Kushner got, was it billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia? Remember that? No. All right, I'm getting off track. Here's what I'm afraid of. I'll be honest with you guys. You know McCarthyism, all right? Back in the 60s, back in the 50s. It was actually back in the 50s. The communist scare, the Red Scare. Okay, there was this whole thing where you have to be American. We had neighbors ratting on neighbors, people in Hollywood being blackballed, people losing their jobs, people being ostracized. It was like a witch hunt. A true witch hunt, not a Donald Trump witch hunt, but a real witch hunt. Like, this guy's a communist menace. This guy's a communist menace. He's not a real American. This is exactly what I'm afraid is going to happen if and when Donald Trump becomes president. And I specifically, I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I'm scared of. My Social Security. I'm 58 years old. When I'm 62 in 4 years, I'll be able to apply for Social Security. And I've actually thought about this. I've actually thought about all the things I've said. I've made 2,500 videos, all of them mostly about recovery or against Donald Trump. I am totally, I am anti-Trumper to the max. And all the stuff that I said in 2,500 videos. Now, if he becomes president, I could actually see a thing like McCarthyism, except a MAGA version of McCarthyism coming back. Like, this guy's anti-American, this guy, because if I say anything about Donald Trump, I'm anti-American. I could actually see him passing laws. I could see this becoming a thing, where certain Americans like me or Bo the Fifth Column, I could see somebody like him or any of these other YouTube, liberal-leaning YouTubers being singled out. And how would they punish somebody that they would, Daryl's not a real American, all this stuff that he said about Donald Trump. He's against making America great again. What would be a punishment, besides for being ostracized in jail and this other stuff? My Social Security. This is something I seriously worry about. I'm an artist. I make money now, and I have about 5 different gigs that I earn money from. Logo design, painting, art, my YouTube channel, drafting, architectural interior drafting, construction. But I'm looking forward to my Social Security when I'm 62 in 4 years, and I could see it working out just, that's what I'm afraid of, a return of this whole McCarthyism, except a MAGA version of it, where I become, the menace, and because it happened before, and I could see it happening again, and that's honestly what I'm afraid of. All right, that's my thoughts. I think it's. I'm very ambivalent about this Supreme Court ruling. I think it was. I think they came back and ruled awfully fast. I think the Supreme Court is bought and paid for by Donald Trump. He elected 3 Supreme Court justices. Or nominated 3 Supreme Court justices. The only other person, Ronald Reagan, nominated 4. Nixon, I think, nominated 4. Look at that, all Republicans packing the Supreme Court. What does that say, man? What does that say? I think they were scared. I think the Supreme Court honestly was scared that the same thing that happened to Congress on January 6th would happen to them if they voted against Donald Trump. But in a way, I'm kind of glad if and when Donald Trump loses, that he won't have an excuse about rigged this and rigged, because he will go out, it's always a quid pro quo with him. If I do a favor for you, you owe me, like with Taylor Swift. Well, I got Taylor Swift money for her songs. She owes me. She better not endorse Joe Biden. He's already said that. And he think, honestly, I'm sure he thinks he owns the Supreme Court at this point. Those three justices owe him their lives, their jobs, and everything. They have to rule in favor of him. And I think the other six are just scared that the whole thing that happened on January 6th will happen to them. But in another way, I'm glad that Donald Trump won't have an excuse to cry about a rigged election. I know he will anyway, but it'll be one less thing to cry about, the Supreme Court ruling. Those are my thoughts on it. Please, I know I'm going to get some people learning me about the Supreme Court. Let me have it in the comments, you guys. I'll be back later with another video. Have a good Tuesday.